Welcome to Sports CTO Talks. In this series, we would be talking to industry leaders from sports and technology, where we will simplify sports for all of you. I am Ami, your guide on this journey through amazing tech leaders. We will dive deep into discussions who are driving the innovations into the industry, from AI to cloud, from cybersecurity to sustainability. If it is sports tech, we are talking about it. Today, we have a very interesting guest with us. We welcome Guy Miller. He is the CTO of Open Sports and AIA Sports. We welcome you, Guy, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Open Sports is an AI-powered platform with standardized APIs that enable secure, real-time sports data sharing for organizations, teams, leagues, and developers. It streamlines the adoption of agentic AI, driving innovation in the sports industry by powering specialized language models for seamless and secure AI integration. The other company is AIA Sports. It is a sports technology and data company focused on unlocking performance insights through advanced data analytics and automation. They specialize in collecting, coding, and interpreting live and post-match sports data, particularly for team sports like rugby, transferring raw video, tracking, and statistical inputs into actionable insight. We welcome you guys once again, and he would be definitely talking about AI, the revolution of AI into sports, from data silos to intelligent insights. So, Guy, my first question and a basic question for my understanding is how has AI transformed the way of sports organizations collecting the data, analyzing the data, and what are the performance metrics to look upon?
So I think that the biggest thing when you're considering sports data, it doesn't matter what sport we're talking about, is it's been siloed. You've got a ton of providers. Every team uses providers for their GPS or their performance or their speed. They've got a number of providers, but that all comes from different data sources. And so when you start to talk about AI and you start to talk about what we can do a huge amount of things, but the first step is now consolidating all those data sources and allowing us to streamline and connect to those sources a lot easier. And that's where OpenSport comes in. We try to create that standardized API for sort of what we call our silos of data. So our first one's being around GPS, the second set around videos, and our third one match data. And we can go as far as we need to do, but it allows a developer or anyone technical to connect to one data source, pass one parameter, and have the connections through to everything. Once we have that data, then we can start to make the AI talk. So that's when it really gets interesting. We need to structure it. We need to make sure it's in a good form. But the AI is significant. I mean, reporting or analysis isn't anything new, but the speed at which we can get to it now and the speed at which we can interpret things and predict things, AI is pretty incredible.
Okay. So, how are sports organizations rethinking the digital transformation? What is happening, in form of strategies or, bridging the departmental data silos, example, it can be medical, it can be tactical or commercial, how everything is coming together.
Well, typically in a sports organization, if I take my background of my undergrad is in sports science, my postgrad is in computer science, and I played professionally rugby, but until July last year. So sort of it was a day-to-day thing that I was doing. And if I take the organizations we were at, we had GPS providers, we had wellness providers, we had speed and fitness providers, we had force plates and speed gates, and then the wellness data was in a different spot. We still had a number of different Excel spreadsheets, but nothing that was and it depends on the size of the organization and where we are, and different sports are further along than others, but there was nothing that consolidated everything. And that meant that my profile as an athlete wasn't a single profile. It was made up of all these different pieces, and it wasn't easy to get to that information. Now what we've found is two-step is that we need to consolidate that so that there's one sort of source of the truth, everything when we can these days with AI and all the APIs available. one source of the truth. Everyone's looking at the same profile or same central sort of uh, database, if you want to call it that. And then the next step is when you add AI to that, the predictability and the predictions we can do with an athlete profile becomes important.
Okay. So, like, what are the challenges faced by legacy teams, like when they integrate AI tools with cross-function departments?
Yeah, I would say it's twofold. The first one is how you structure. I mean, again, depending on the size of the organization, not every organization has number one a data analyst or someone to interpret that data. The second is a data engineer to how we actually get that data, and then particularly for the legacy systems, how do we get that data into a data source or into a form that's it's ETL, and we get to a form where we can actually use it with the AI. So that's one thing is actually implementing AI in an organization. What do we want to do and how can we use it? Because every day there's a new tool that comes out. There's a new thing. Everyone can supposedly create apps, but actually it's quite generic. So you can't just say, well, I use ChatGPT and now I use AI in my organization. It's how do we actually model something? How do we make something that works for you and you understand? And the second aspect to that in terms of adoption of AI, we found is that in an organization, we assume that these days that the majority of people have played with ChatGPT or have used ChatGPT, and that's sort of the, if you want to call it, the chat functionality of a model is sort of what people have got used to. But it's actually not the case. There's some people for 40 years have been just looking at reports, and they don't want to, nor do they have the trust yet that what is being brought out or chat interface, the numbers and the reasoning coming back is true. And so there's that adoption, never mind implementing the model, the adoption of using AI and the trust of using the information that's coming back to you is a challenge at the moment.
Absolutely. So, like according to you, or like what is the biggest limitation these days implementing AI into sports? Like it can be misinterpreted something, or is it non-quantifiable, or is there any research happening where teams are working on it?
There's lots of research happening. I think the uh, two limitations. One, access to the data. So it depends. I mean, open sport, we've got yeah, unified data sources where we can use them to create models, but models could also be public data based, or it could be based on your internal models and your internal data. Not everything is shared. And so the first limitation is access to the data and making sure that that data is getting to where we need it to be. Um, yeah, and then the second one is, to your point, is around trust. So the big thing we focused on is if I use a non-technical example, but an example of real life analysis. Like some teams would use at a very basic level. One of their metrics might be that a player or an athlete needs to hit 90% of his max running speed, for example, once a week. If not, they've suggested the use of that injuries are more likely. Other teams might use a percentage of call it 85%. So we can't instruct the model to generically use 90% or 85%. It needs to be able to adapt to what the team internally needs. So we need to be able to feed instructions into our models, into our agents, which allow teams to manipulate uh, barriers, or if you want to call it that, uh, and change that sort of information. So yeah, it's evolving really quickly, but yeah, those are the challenges at the moment.
So, like, what are the key data silos like that exist within the sports teams or federations, and why have they been difficult to break down?
The biggest thing that's going on in sport is who owns the data. So it's very it's a very interesting topic at the moment. I'm not going to position myself one way or the other, but um, it's if you take a single GPS unit, um, there's APIs available for that. But the question is, does the GPS provider who has created and built the software and the hardware, do they own the data because it's all in their databases? the team or the federation pays for the GPS data to be used within the club. So do they own it? And the athlete actually produces the data because they wear the units. And so that is a very, very interesting topic and a hot topic at the moment about how you get there and how we can actually use it and who owns it.
Absolutely. So, like when you were talking about this GPS, I wanted, like, I want to understand how can AI help unify diverse data sets into a single intelligent system. It can be the biometric, the videos, the GPS, or the fan engagement data.
Yeah. How can it help unify it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How
So,
can that
so
unify diverse data sets into, single
yeah.
intelligent systems?
Yeah, so what we've done is we basically, if you want to talk about agentic AI, what we try and do is basically create models based on single data sets, so you can interact with a single model if you want. But where the unification happens is that with agentic AI, if you want, it basically holds profiles of users, of athletes. So we can go in, ask it about anything about me, but because the back end is starting to talk to all these different models that are all connected to different data sources, we can ask about load monitoring, we can ask about particular profiles, and everything's connected in one place in one interface, which before was a lot harder to get to, a lot longer to get to. And it had a lot of manual steps, people in pulling stuff out of Excel these days. We don't have to do that anymore. The answers are there in front of you. And I'll say as well that in terms of the unification, the not only does it unify it, it goes a lot further than what we could do. If we talk about interpreting, um, it used to be reports. So if we could eventually unify all this thing and we went from, okay, we've got 7 data sets to now we've maybe got it, we hacked away and we've got it into a Power BI or something like that. That's cool, but you still have to look at the graphs and it gives you a picture of what's going on, but then you need to interpret it, analyze, and make sort of decisions based on it. With AI, now based on the
Okay.
huge amount of data we can have and the unified amount of data, the predictions that can be made are happening just so much faster. There's things and patterns that are seen that we don't see, or we would take weeks to see, or we would potentially miss, which could end up in injury, which is a problem for these organizations.
Absolutely. So, like, but like, how can this data, when we are talking about, like, how can we convert the raw data into actionable items, for the coaches, for the teams, for the athletes, for the analysts? How can we do that?
So that's one thing we're doing with our product at Playwise is you take for me the what we do is we take industry, if you want to call it industry leaders in their particular area. Um, because as I said at the beginning, it needs to work for your organization and for what you want to do. So to get actionable insights, you need instructions and you need to actually instruct on what needs to happen. Everyone's slightly different. But the big question I have at the moment is once we look at a team and we can have generic models that any team can use, but if a team wants a team, an organization, whatever it is, a provider wants a specific model, the question becomes, what do you want to see on the other side? And as you start building that sort of stuff, the actionable insights they come because they already know what they're currently looking at. But then the big question, when you think like ChatGPT, they've implemented this tool that's the deep research. So how do you with your models say, okay, if we're doing load monitoring in a sports organization, which it doesn't matter what sport you're doing, monitoring your athletes, the latest research says we need to now look at this, which you could find technically from a tool, a new tool, you could implement that tool. But the question becomes, how much of that do you want to actually implement automatically, or do you expect still that there's the human aspect that goes and says, okay, here's my latest research. I bring the research back. Here's our suggestions on the latest research, and they then interpret that and feed it into instructions within the model itself. So in terms of implementing and adopting this AI, it can be in two forms. It could be yourself creating yourself or creating what you need, knowing exactly what you need and what you're looking for, or it could be starting with the general models that we know for the last 10, 15 years, everyone's still looking at similar statistics. Yes, they've evolved, but it's similar things we're looking at.
Absolutely. So, like when you're talking about this, h- like, are there any researchers happening in the ways AI is changing or managing teams, specifically the teams managing the injury or the athlete load?
Yes, there is
Okay.
a ton happening. So we've got a few pilots going with different teams, but um, it's always an interesting team. Like we assume as well when you implement AI, if you take one organization, that there might be a strategy to implement AI, but there could be five or six different AI implementations happening because my way of implementing our model, um, it might be slightly different, or because the area is not so new, if you want to call it that, but where we are and the speed it's evolving is somewhat new and fresh. No, we're not really sure, and we're changing on the fly. We're going as we go. We're implementing things. We're changing. We're learning. We're adapting. We're taking sort of that feedback and putting it back in. But there's quite a few teams, especially bigger teams with bigger budgets, that cost a lot of money. If you are training your own models, that costs money. Otherwise, there's a lot of bigger teams doing research, a ton of research projects on seeing how accurate and how accurate these answers that are coming back and these predictions and prescriptions that are coming back from the models are. But the big thing behind that is that reasoning. So that's a lot of work we're doing at the moment. So reasoning, how do we get to those answers?
Absolutely. So, like, can you share a few examples where AI has helped, optimizing the in-game strategies or real-time data?
Yeah. So if you, I'll go back to what we used to do. If we took um, what used to happen is we'd take data. It was always post match, so you couldn't do the real time stuff. Now with the real time stuff, um, people have dashboards. So we've seen that they're seeing on their iPads or they're next to the field. They're seeing live feeds from their different data sources. Um, but up until this point, without AI, there was someone interpreting these five different iPads with five different data sets, trying to say, okay, this guy or girl, this athlete is getting tired, or this is the optimal time, or this is what's happening in the game, or match, and this is what we need to do for the load monitoring. But you couldn't do that fast enough. By the time you do it, you're too late, and maybe there's touch wood, there's an injury, or something happens. Now with AI, the way it's working is it's like having a person next to you interpreting full time on the fly with all the data set, ingesting all the data, interpreting the data, and going further than we could as humans at the moment. It's doing it at a speed, and like I said earlier, a speed that we can't keep up with, and sees things that we wouldn't otherwise see. So the accuracy of the accuracy and precision of making decisions in real time in matches has completely changed.
Okay.
Matches or training.
Absolutely. So, like, you being a technical person, I want to understand more of, what are the ethical considerations or privacy policies need to be intact or already are being there when you use AI to process so much of data.
Yeah. Um, so let's start with the privacy. The big thing, as I mentioned earlier, is who owns the data. So I can't go and take another organization's data, train my numbers and my predictions and everything on someone else's data, and then release that. Nor can I have any data leakage or any hallucinations or anything like that. And that becomes it is the biggest, it is a barrier at the moment of us releasing models because people are very worried about giving access to, especially if you use some of the LLMs for interpretation or anything like that, or natural language querying. They assume that, well, not they assume, you have to be sure that it's not leaving your environment. So the privacy is one of the biggest constraints at the moment and one of the most important things. Myself, when I was playing, I wouldn't want my data getting to the hands of my competitors. Um, which is a big thing. So yeah, there's that, and then the privacy and yeah and ethics is just more around how we use it, what can we do with the data, and how do we as developers and as companies provide enough or give enough confidence to the end users to say that data is not going anywhere. How do we construct our architectures so that we ensure that the data is linked to an organization? The data sets are a big thing. I mean, we've got all these different compliances now. We've got GDPR or HIPAA or whatever it is, and that's a huge thing when it comes to data. So we have to be able to architect in a way as well that if some organization is situated in India, for example, if they want their data hosted in India, we have to be able to very quickly change and move our regions, our data sets to make sure that our compliance is good.
Absolutely. So, like, in what ways is AI shaping the future of fan experience? Because that is the thing at the end of the day. And, personalization into broadcasting, because everything these days is about social media or some broadcasting agency. So, how is the
Yeah.
AI reshaping that?
So it's if I can summarize AI and what it's doing, it's delivering this delivering information at a rate at which we couldn't do before, interpreting and delivering. So when we get to fan engagement, um, as I said at the beginning, it starts with how we can get that data. So people are developing hardware and new data sources. I mean, just in sport alone, it's happening in NFL, it's happening everywhere. We've gone from what was just a GPS chip to now having the GPS in the ball. We've got the GPS on. We've got speed of athletes. We've got GPS. We've got speed of revolutions. How far things are being kicked or moved, or um, and what we can do. And that's the aspect of say raw data and standard data. When you combine that now with we're going to go slightly astray, but your virtuality and things, I imagine a point at which we can how we're currently shaping is we're interpreting and delivering this data so much faster, things we couldn't do in front of the broadcasters. I'd love to see if I was an aspiring athlete or something like that, what these professional athletes are doing, how fast they're passing or throwing, or how fast they're moving, or it's quite interesting. But now when you add the next level, which is your live feeds into virtual reality, you could almost be on the field, seeing in real time what's happening, the athletes around you, how fast they're doing their starters. If I was defending against or playing against this person, what's actually happening? So in terms of fan engagement, there are companies doing that. And fan engagement, like you said, is a massive thing. But I just think that when we really start to put these two together, we can start to do some interesting things.
Absolutely. So, like, one last question is like, what is the future, or what do you see like in the next 3 to 5 years into the sports ecosystem, where we can break down the silos and, like, completely from the start to the end game?
Oof, that's a big question. What I see of the next 3 to 5 years or where it's going to go,
Absolutely.
to that's a great question. To be honest, it's really hard to predict because I mean, 3 to 5. Imagine if you think about 3 to 5 years ago, where we were with sport, well, sport and with AI particularly, we weren't near where we are now, and the speed at which we're moving. Um, I just think that the it's going to be towards well, big time on fan engagement. I do think there's going to be the aspect of virtual reality that comes into it. So before we went from everybody sitting in a stadium to now less of that happening, people following on their phones. But if we can now combine that, and so the AI is helping that all happening in real time and predicting and things like predictions and things like that. But I imagine in a couple of years where everyone's walking around with their glasses or whatever, and it's like they're at the stadium, or they are they not only do they have the atmosphere of the stadium, but they have the impression that they're actually sitting next to people at the stadium, or they can choose to subscribe to being on the field, watching live what's happening and how the players are moving, or how the sport is actually happening. I mean, if you take cricket for example, I would love to know how fast some of these bowlers are bowling. Their bowler bounces your head. What happens there? How do you move? And would I? I mean, I don't want to face it myself, but you use virtual reality and what's happening. It gets very, very, very cool very quickly.
Absolutely. One more question. Like, I have a lot of questions, but I'll still ask you one more question. Like,
That's fine.
when you see the next, few years, like, what would you suggest or guide the upcoming startups who are entering into the sports tech domain? Like, what are the things they should take care of? Or, from end to end, a few guidelines or suggestions or a few quick tips?
Is it for new sports organizations or people who are trying to adopt AI?
No, for new sports organizations or for new sports startups who are entering into the field of sports tech and they are
Yeah,
working with AI.
yeah. For me, for uh, sorry, just to understand your question, do you want the AI sports tech side or a new organization coming in using sports tech?
New organization coming
Okay,
in who,
using sports tech.
absolutely.
What I would say is is you need to go AI first, because what we're doing now is just the speed at which you can do things is unparalleled. And I would do AI first. The considerations. Sorry, so just for the data, I'd go AI first. A lot of the AI stuff is helping to gather that data, so it's either it's scraping or it's collecting or it's using an already established and trained model, whatever it is. I would use that, but one of the big considerations is around your data, how you make sure and understand that it's using your data alone. The responses that are being given by the AI are aligned with what you want to see, and that what we're seeing at the moment and what we be careful of is that AI is still evolving and training, and we've got reinforcement learning, we've got all these things going on, but we need to be sure that we don't just listen to the AI, stop actually thinking and reflecting on what's written in front of us and just go with that. There still needs to be an aspect of, as it's developing so fast, still needs to be an aspect of some sort of reflection and some sort of understanding of what's happening. Because if you can align those two and keep on training it on the things you want to see, things you want to do, and check what's going on, I think that you can develop and grow and scale business so much faster if we do AI first, provided it's done the same way. Because inversely, if you use it poorly, I can see very quickly that it could go the other way, and you can make mistakes that could cost you you and your athletes. I mean, we talk about sports, but um, yeah, in general.
Absolutely. Now we would move on to the next segment of the podcast, that is rapid fire questions. I'll ask you a few questions. You'll have to be very quick in answering. It's one word or
Okay,
one sentence max.
okay,
Okay.
go.
First, data dashboards or gut instinct? What wins the final minute?
Gut instinct.
Okay. Would you trust AI to pick your fantasy football team?
Yes,
One word to describe AI in sports today.
fast.
If your wearable could talk, what would you think it would say after a workout?
It should have worked harder.
Okay. What's more exciting, a last minute goal or a breakthrough data insight?
A breakthrough insight, because that
Okay.
can give you it can predict the goal.
Okay. If you could plug AI into any sport that hasn't embraced it yet, which one would it be?
Or is that quickfire that hasn't embraced it yet? I can't think of a sport at the top of my head, but the sport with the most data points, probably a something like Red Bull.
Okay. Choose your AI teammate, a predictive scout, a smart physio, or a strategy bot.
Strategy bot.
Okay. Who is your favorite legendary player of all time?
Durant. I highly doubt you know him, but it's a rugby and ex South African rugby
Ah,
player.
okay. If you had to take him out for dinner, where would you take him?
Steakhouse.
Perfect. You did a good job. So, like, now we'll move on to another, the last segment of the podcast. That is, you'll have to answer
Sure.
one question into 30 seconds. Like, according to you, what is AI into sports in 2025? What is the role of
Uh,
AI?
the role of AI is going to be around consolidating and starting to interpret some results. The biggest focus for me of 2025 is to increase the accuracy and the reasoning behind the results. We can get the results, but how accurate are they, and how can we understand and better help it reason?
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you guys so much for the insights and your time today and joining us today on the podcast.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So everyone, let's stay connected and please share this video with your friends, families, and the people who love sports and technology. We will meet in the next week, in the next episode. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, keep exploring.